Somewhere in a climate-controlled vault at Yale University, there is a book. It is handwritten on vellum. It is 240 pages long. It is illustrated with plants that don't exist, astronomical charts that match no known sky, and human figures submerged in pools connected by elaborate tubes. It was carbon dated to the early 15th century. It has been studied by professional code breakers who cracked Nazi encryption during World War II. It has been examined by the National Security Agency. It has been analyzed by artificial intelligence. Not a single word has ever been decoded. Not one. The language it is written in has never been identified. The plants it depicts have never been found. The book exists. The book speaks. And no one alive can understand what it says. On August 15, 1977, at 11:16 p.m., a radio telescope in Ohio detected a signal from space. 72 seconds, precisely structured, transmitted at the hydrogen line frequency, the frequency scientists had theorized for decades would be the logical choice for any civilization attempting contact. The signal was so extraordinary that the researcher who found it in the data printout 3 days later wrote one word in the margin next to it. That word became the signal's name. Scientists have searched for it again ever since. Modern analysis has identified the most likely star it came from. That star has been observed repeatedly. The signal has never been heard again. In February 1959, 9 experienced Soviet hikers fled their tent on a mountain slope in the Ural Mountains, -40°C, without shoes, without adequate clothing. They cut their way out from the inside rather than using the entrance. They ran downhill toward a tree line. Some climbed a tree, some sheltered in a ravine. All 9 died. The Soviet government closed the investigation with the phrase compelling unknown force and sealed the area for 3 years. In 2021, the Russian government said it was an avalanche. In 2026, a new paper proposed they were driven out by a chemical reaction in the atmosphere that created a fog of nitric acid. Neither theory has satisfied everyone. The question of what was terrifying enough to make 9 experienced mountaineers choose near certain death in the open over the safety of their tent has never been fully answered. 3 anomalies. 3 moments when reality produced something it had no business producing. 3 cases where every tool we have reached its limit and stopped. Tonight we go as far as the evidence takes us, and we stop, honestly, where the evidence stops. Let's begin with the book that has defeated every mind that has tried to read it. The Voynich Manuscript is a handwritten, illustrated book housed at Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, where it is cataloged as MS 408. It contains approximately 240 pages. Some pages have been removed, leaving gaps in the original pagination, of text written on vellum treated animal skin, in an entirely unknown writing system, accompanied by elaborate illustrations. Carbon dating conducted in 2009 at the University of Arizona placed the creation of the vellum between approximately 1404 and 1438, the early 15th century, consistent with late medieval Europe. The text, the writing system used throughout the manuscript, is entirely unlike any known historical script. It uses approximately 25-30 distinct characters or symbols in varying combinations. The text flows left to right. It has what appear to be word breaks, consistent spacing between units that suggest individual words. The same character combinations appear with statistical frequencies that linguists have identified as consistent with natural language, rather than random symbol generation. In other words, it reads like a language. It has the statistical patterns of genuine communication, but it has never been decoded. The illustrations are organized in apparent sections. Botanical section, approximately 113 pages of plant illustrations. The plants are rendered in careful detail: roots, stems, leaves, flowers. They do not correspond to any known plant species, living or extinct. Some bear vague resemblances to real plants but with impossible combinations of features. Some appear entirely fantastical. Astronomical section. Pages of circular diagrams with what appear to be star formations, the sun and moon, and figures arranged in concentric patterns. The astronomical formations do not match any known star charts from any era. Biological section. Pages showing naked human figures, predominantly female, in pools or streams connected by elaborate pipe or tube systems. The figures appear to be bathing or undergoing some process. The system they're connected to has no obvious analog in medieval medicine or philosophy. Pharmaceutical section. Pages showing what appear to be plant parts in containers or vessels, with text. Recipe or text section. Dense text with few illustrations. The manuscript takes its name from Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912 from the Jesuit College of Villa Mondragon in Frascati, Italy. Voynich recognized its uniqueness immediately and began investigating its provenance. A letter found with the manuscript, dated 1665 or 1666, was from Johannes Marcus Marse of Cromrij, a Bohemian physician and rector of Charles University in Prague, to Athanasius Kircher, a Jesuit scholar in Rome. The letter described the manuscript and mentioned a previous owner's belief that it had been purchased by Emperor Rudolf II of Germany for 600 gold ducats. Rudolf II was known for collecting unusual and occult objects. Before Rudolf, the manuscript's history is unknown. The list of people who have attempted to decode the Voynich manuscript reads, like a who's who of code-breaking history. During World War I and World War II, professional cryptographers who had broken enemy ciphers attempted to decode it. They failed. The U.S. National Security Agency, whose work breaks the world's most sophisticated cryptographic systems, examined the manuscript. Their classified report was partially declassified in the 1970s. Conclusion: undeciphered. Academic linguists, computer scientists, and AI systems have analyzed the statistical properties of the text. Multiple research papers have been published. The most recent major AI analysis, using techniques similar to those used to decode ancient languages, identified patterns consistent with an unknown Semitic or other non-European language root. This has not led to decipherment. Theories about the manuscript's nature range widely. It is a genuine unknown language, possibly from a culture or community that left no other surviving records. It is an elaborate hoax, created in the medieval period to appear valuable and mysterious, potentially to be sold to a credulous buyer like Emperor Rudolf II. It is a constructed or invented language, created by a single author as a private cipher or philosophical system. It is steganographic, containing hidden messages in a way that makes the surface text appear to be language, while the actual information is encoded in the illustrations, the spacing, or some other feature not yet identified. No theory has gained consensus. No proposed decipherment has been accepted by the academic community. As of today, the Voynich manuscript remains exactly what it was when Wilfrid Voynich acquired it in 1912. A book full of words in a language no one can read, illustrating things that don't exist. It sits in a climate-controlled vault in Yale University. It is cataloged, photographed, digitized, accessible to anyone online, and still entirely unreadable. From a book that speaks in a language no one knows, to a signal from a direction no one can locate. You may know the story of the WOW, signal from the basic account. August 15, 1977, Ohio State University's Big Ear Radio Telescope, researcher Jerry Amon, 72 seconds, the notation in red pen. What has changed is what we now know about where it came from, and what that means. For decades, the origin coordinates of the WOW signal were known only approximately. The Big Ear Telescope worked by fixed pointing. The Earth's rotation carried the telescope's field of view across the sky. As a result, the signal's position could only be narrowed to a general area of the sky in the constellation Sagittarius, covering a range of right ascension and declination. Two candidate source regions were identified, because the Big Ear had two feed horns that could receive signals, and it was never established which horn detected the wow signal. This created two possible origin points separated by a significant angular distance. In 2020, astronomer Alberto Caballero published analysis in the International Journal of Astrobiology that used data from the Gaia Space Telescope, which has mapped the precise positions of over 1 billion stars to identify candidate star systems in both possible origin regions. His finding: within the primary candidate region, there is a Sun-like star, 2 mass 19,280,1980,226 for 0123, located approximately 1,800 light-years from Earth. It is a G-type main sequence star, similar in size and temperature to our own Sun. Caballero's paper proposed this star as the most plausible known candidate for the origin of the wow signal, the first time a specific star had been identified with this level of precision as a potential source. In 2022, a separate team of researchers conducted follow-up analysis specifically addressing the 2017 comet hypothesis, the proposal by Antonio Paris that the wow signal was caused by cometary hydrogen. The follow-up study found that the hydrogen emissions from known comets were orders of magnitude too weak to produce a signal with the wow signal's intensity. The narrowband nature of the wow signal, it was detected at almost exactly the hydrogen line frequency with very little spread, is inconsistent with the diffuse hydrogen cloud that surrounds a comet. A comet's hydrogen cloud would produce a broadband signal, not a narrowband one. The comet hypothesis effectively failed independent verification. This matters because the comet hypothesis was the most credible non-extraordinary explanation that had been proposed. With it weakened, the remaining plausible explanations are a highly unusual natural astronomical phenomenon concentrated at the precise hydrogen line frequency in a narrowband transmission, something not previously documented in radio astronomy. A transmission from an artificial source. Following Caballero's paper, efforts were made to observe 2 mass 19,280,1980,226 for 0123 with radio telescopes to search for repeating signals. No repeat signal has been detected. This is consistent with either explanation. An unusual natural phenomenon unlikely to repeat at the same time and frequency, or an artificial transmission that has not been sent again, or that has been sent but not yet caught in the observation windows available. The SETI Institute notes that detecting a single non-repeating signal is insufficient to claim confirmed alien contact. Any genuine extraterrestrial intelligence attempting communication would presumably transmit repeatedly to maximize the chance of detection. The wow signal singularity is one of the strongest arguments against the extraterrestrial hypothesis. But it remains the strongest argument in favor of it as well. Because if an extraterrestrial civilization were pointing a powerful narrowband transmitter at the hydrogen line in our direction, just once, or rarely, this is precisely what we would expect to detect. The wow signal occurred 47 years ago. Modern radio telescopes are orders of magnitude more sensitive than the Big Ear. The target star has been identified. The search continues. And so far, silence. From a signal that came once and never repeated, to 9 people who fled in terror and never explained why. You know the basic facts of Dyatlov Pass. 9 experienced Soviet hikers, the Ural Mountains, February 1959. Their tent cut from the inside. Bodies found scattered across the slope. internal injuries without external trauma, missing soft tissue. The Soviet investigation closed with the phrase compelling unknown force. What you may not know is what researchers published in early 2026. The 2021 Russian government investigation, reopened on the 60th anniversary, officially concluded that the hikers died as a result of a slab avalanche. This conclusion was almost universally rejected by the families of the victims, independent researchers, and most Dyatlov Pass investigators. The primary objections to the avalanche theory: the tense position on the slope, combined with the snow conditions documented at the time, was inconsistent with a slab avalanche capable of causing the documented injuries. Multiple investigators and searchers from 1959 specifically noted the absence of avalanche evidence, no snow disturbance, no swept terrain in the area surrounding the tent. The internal injuries, rib fractures consistent with high-impact trauma, skull fractures with no external wounds, are not typical of avalanche injury patterns. In February 2026, a research paper published in a peer-reviewed atmospheric physics journal proposed a new mechanism: atmospheric airglow combined with nitric acid formation. Airglow is a documented natural phenomenon, faint luminescence produced in Earth's upper atmosphere by photochemical reactions, particularly at night at high latitudes. It is not normally visible to the naked eye. However, under specific atmospheric and geomagnetic conditions, intense localized airglow events can produce visible light in the sky, light that has historically been reported as unexplained phenomena. More significantly for the Dyatlov case, the atmospheric conditions that produce intense airglow at high latitudes can also produce elevated concentrations of nitrogen oxides in the lower atmosphere. Nitrogen oxides, reacting with atmospheric moisture, produce nitric acid. Nitric acid exposure at sufficient concentrations causes immediate burning of mucous membranes and respiratory tissue, disorientation and panic, chemical burns on exposed skin. In severe exposure, pulmonary edema, fluid accumulation in the lungs. At extreme concentrations, rapid incapacitation. The 2026 paper proposed the following sequence. On the night of February 12, 1959, an intense localized airglow event over the Kalet-Siekle area produced elevated atmospheric nitrogen oxides that, combined with the cold, moisture-laden air at the mountain elevation, created a transient nitric acid fog. The hikers, sleeping in their tent, were first exposed through the tent fabric. The burning sensation and disorientation caused them to cut their way out, explaining the tent cut from the inside and the apparent panic, rather than taking time to dress properly or collect their equipment. The nitric acid fog then drove the group down the slope, away from the area of highest concentration, explaining why they fled toward the tree line rather than seeking shelter elsewhere. The injuries. Some hikers sheltered under the snow in the ravine, where the cold and their compromised respiratory systems eventually killed them. The force of collapsing snow above the ravine, combined with the already weakened state of their ribs from chemical exposure effects on tissue, could account for the internal fractures without external bruising. The missing soft tissue on Lyudmila Dubinina, her tongue, eyes, and lips, was reinterpreted as scavenging by small animals in the months before the bodies were found, facilitated by the exposure of soft tissue during the initial trauma. Critically, the paper cited documented records of unusual atmospheric luminescence, reported by witnesses in the Ural region in late January and early February 1959, as consistent with the type of geomagnetic activity that produces intense airglow events. The Soviet military had also conducted high-altitude rocket tests in the region during this period, which could have contributed to nitrogen oxide concentrations at certain altitudes. The theory has been received with cautious interest by the Dyatlov Foundation, the organization established by the families to pursue the truth, and by independent researchers who have long rejected the avalanche conclusion. Critics note that the mechanism, while chemically plausible, would require very specific atmospheric and geomagnetic conditions occurring in a very localized area at exactly the right time. The paper acknowledges this and proposes that the specific geography of Khalat-Syakhl, its elevation, aspect, and position relative to known geomagnetic anomaly zones in the northern Urals, makes it a plausible candidate for such events. The debate is ongoing. The case remains open. What can be said? 9 experienced people fled their tent in conditions that guaranteed death without adequate clothing or equipment. They were terrified enough to choose near certain death in the open over staying in their tent. Whatever they encountered in those final hours, whether nitric acid fog, an avalanche, military accident, or something else entirely, it was convincing enough that trained, experienced mountaineers made the worst possible decision available to them. And they were right to be afraid. The Voynich manuscript has been at Yale for over a century, digitized, analyzed by AI, examined by the world's best cryptographers. It still says nothing to us. Every word is a mystery. In 1977, something pointed a transmission at Earth. 72 seconds, the most structured, powerful signal ever detected by SETI. It never came again. The star it likely came from has been identified. Nobody is answering. 9 people cut their way out of their tent in the middle of the night at -40 degrees and died in the snow. In 2026, we may finally understand the physical mechanism that drove them out. We still don't fully understand what they experienced in those final hours. 3 anomalies at the edge of what we know. Here is what connects them. They are all cases where our best tools, linguistic analysis, radio astronomy, forensic pathology, atmospheric chemistry, have reached their documented limits. We can get close. We can propose theories. We cannot get all the way there. That gap between what we can almost explain and what we cannot is where the most interesting science lies, and also where the most interesting terror lies. Drop your theory in the comments, especially on Dyatlov. The 2026 nitric acid paper is recent enough that the debate is genuinely open. Your analysis is welcome. Share this with someone who studies atmospheric science, linguistics, or radio astronomy. These aren't unsolved mysteries in the detective sense. They're unsolved in the scientific sense, which is more interesting and more honest. Subscribe to WhisprFrame for more documented anomalies at the edge of human understanding. Because the frontier of what we know is always one discovery away from moving. And some of the most important discoveries will come from someone who refused to accept an explanation that didn't fully fit. The manuscript is still unread, the signal is still silent, the mountain is still waiting. And somewhere the answers exist.